And welcome to Parashat Metzorah. And here we again reinforce the idea that a spiritual disease cannot be cured by the same cures as a physical disease. Whilst they have a commonality that in both cases it is Hashem that heals you, and in both cases it takes much longer to heal than it does to be contaminated. But a physical affliction is something that was brought by man, and he's not able to get himself out of that, and therefore needs the help of a doctor and remedies with the help of Hashem to get him out of that. But a spiritual disease is a disease that is caused by the mind, and therefore a doctor is going to be of no use to you. Not even the priest actually heals you. The fascinating thing is that it's the very person that committed the sin of evil speech that caused the affliction. He and only he is the person that can get himself out of it through the act of teshuvah. Because when he created that sin created a defilement of the soul, and through the act of teshuvah, it cleanses that defilement. And the Torah clearly says that the Metzorah is himself the mitaher, the person that heals. And he's only presented to the priest after the healing has taken place. The priest just confirms that the teshuvah has been sincere and that he's no longer under the influence of that negative energy. And so the priest is actually a clarifying verdict of your state of teshuvah. And the Alshech quotes a fascinating story from Kings 2, chapter 20, where it talks about King Chizkiyahu. He did something wrong, and as a result of that, the prophet Isaiah said to him that you will die and you will no longer live, meaning that he has forfeited both his the remainder of his life in this world and also in the world to come. But King Chizkiyahu prayed to God for forgiveness, and as a result of that, his life was extended by 15 years. And it's fascinating the words of Isaiah that expresses that recovery. In Isaiah 38 verse 9, it says, the recovery is described as when he became sick and he lived from his sickness, rather than when he recovered from his sickness, meaning that it was his sickness that made him live. And the idea behind this is as follows: that while he was sick, he was able to contemplate the cause of his sickness that caused his teshuvah, and that drew him closer to Hashem, something that could not have occurred otherwise. And therefore, by afflicting Chizkiyahu with this affliction, Hashem actually helped save him, and therefore the sickness was responsible for his continued life. And so from here we see that learning Torah and observing its Torah is a preventative medicine. It is a catalyst through which triggers rehabilitation for those who neglected part of it prior to their suffering and affliction. And now let's look at the process of purification. So even after the 7 days of isolation and the teshuvah, the person has to perform the following ritual, having been seen by the priest. In chapter 14, verse 4, we go through the 2 pure live birds that have to be assembled for this process. And we see that birds are basically an allusion to constant twittering and speech. And it's the abuse of the power of speech that caused that affliction in the first place. Now, Maimonides says that there are 3 basic categories of speech. The first is Torah, which benefits your spiritual life. The second is earning a living, the speech you need to do for your physical parnasa, also needed. The third, however, is any other form of speech, which typically is displeasing of Hashem because it doesn't produce anything productive. There's nothing productive in it. So the 2 birds represent the spiritual life, which is the Torah, and the physical life, which is the Parashat. And it's the spiritual bird representing the spiritual life that is actually sacrificed and shecht. And then the physical bird is put into the blood of the sacrificed spiritual bird, together with the cedar wood, which itself is reflecting the other types of speech. Why the cedar wood? Because it's tall and haughty and is representative of the ego. And also it produces no fruit and it has no aroma. There's nothing productive in it. And then you have this red dye wool that's put together. The dye is created from a specific worm, which is called Shani Tolad. And this worm had the physical look of a tongue, which is why the Alshech said it's used. And together with the modest hyssop plant, which is the lowly plant, which is an allusion to humility, which is the key aspect of the catalyst for teshuvah. And so you have all these symbolism of the process. And the first bird is slaughtered, representing the spiritual life of the person. And the blood is put in an earthen vessel together with spring water, because that's an allusion to the Torah, which is Maim Chaim. And so we take this second bird, which represents life, and we dip it into the spiritual blood of the spiritual bird to indicate that we should use the power of speech for worthy things like Torah learning and studying in order to enhance our spiritual life. And that all other forms of speech should be subordinate to the speech of Torah. And it's a very elaborate process. You have to shave off all the hair of the Metzorah on the seventh day, all the head hair, the beard hair, and the eyebrows. Why all of that? Well, the head hair represents haughtiness. The beard is surrounding the mouth and represents the speech. And the eyebrows is an allusion to jealousy, because narrow eyes are jealous eyes. And then finally, he has to wash his clothes because the clothes are the characteristics that we acquire. And so we have to cleanse them, cleanse the characteristics which produced affliction. And then we take the lamb and we shecht it, and the Kohen puts the blood onto the right ear, the right thumb, and the right foot, and the right toe, because there are three people who are affected by Lashon Hara. The listener, and that is represented by the ear. When you listen to Lashon Hara, you're encouraged to produce acts of violence and incorrect actions as a result of the Lashon Hara that you've heard, and therefore you have to sprinkle the blood onto your thumb, the right thumb. And also when you do something violently as a result of listening to Lashon Hara, you actually have to flee for your life to the Ira Miklat, and therefore the blood is also put on your right toe. In addition to that, we have oil, which is put on all the three items: the ears, the thumb, and the toe, and also on the head. And finally, you can eat the sacrificial meat and then be reintroduced back into the community. Wow, what a long process. I mean, I'm telling you, for a few words of inaccurate speech, there's a whole weeks of isolation, and then this very convoluted process to enact your complete purification and recovery back to health. And so therefore my blessing to you is that before you say anything, just take 5 seconds and think, is what I'm about to say going to benefit the world and to benefit me, or create negative forces that are going to actually come to hound me? May we always choose the positive talk, positive language, and may we always have the blessing of good health and an awareness that what we say affects our well-being. Shabbat Shalom. See you next week.